Africa, but across the world last Sunday. This is the moment in the last minute of normal playing time in the African Cup of Nations, or Afcon final, when Senegal's team walked off the pitch. And that was because the referee, Jean-Jacques Ndala from the Democratic Republic of Congo, had awarded the hosts, Morocco, a controversial penalty with the score at 0-0. You were gripped.
I was absolutely gripped. Yes, I really was. I watched the entire tournament. I must say, first of all, I get very, very nervous when I'm speaking about international football and sat next to an Argentinian.
I did wonder that.
I must say too. But I really do. Yeah, Maradona's last game was played against Nigeria, last international competitive game. But there we go. So it was an interesting moment that suddenly this match, beautiful tournament, well hosted, well put together, everything that happened. Afcon is really frontier, exciting football. Suddenly, the referee makes two controversial decisions within the last couple of moments of the game, and all pandemonium breaks loose. But what then happened is that Senegal pulled their players off the pitch. That was interesting, first of all. But then came an element after about 20 minutes, their players went back on and they actually saved the penalty award against them.
It was a terrible penalty.
It was a terrible penalty. Yeah. In fact, I am a Brahim truther, meaning that I believe the conspiracy that he did it on purpose. Yeah. I think deep down that he didn't want to score that because he knew there was probably less. But who knows? But what really happened is that it's bred a bit of a debate about this concept of fair play, because some people were saying that the Senegalese they didn't show the tenets of fair play, or actually they didn't actually behave themselves appropriately, or they didn't show sportsmanship. And then some people were debating about it online, about the concept of fair play and sportsmanship, whether it actually has a bit of a colonial nature to it, a bit of an expectation that you should be accepting of bad treatment or bad behaviour or cheating on behalf of somebody else or so. And it's something that really just had me think about it quite a bit.
Well, that leads us rather nicely to talk to Jonathan Wilson, who's a UK-based football writer and contributor to The Guardian newspaper, who has covered several Afcons during his career. Jonathan, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
And you were at this final, weren't you? I mean, what did you think when all of that took place?
I mean, it was chaos. To be honest, my attention had been attracted to the other end of the ground when the penalty was awarded. There was around about, I think it was 2,800 Senegal fans in this stadium of 66,500 who were all wearing red, all going mad for Morocco. And the Senegal fans, as they always do, there's a third of them wear red, a third of them wear yellow, a third of them wear green, and they stand in order and they sway back and forth. And it's an incredible sight. And to be honest, it's an even more incredible sight when they suddenly start fighting with riot police. And so that was all going on at the left end of the ground as I was looking at it. When I turned back for the penalty and realised, hang on, where's the Senegal team gone? They're not there anymore. And you could see the goalkeeper, Mendy, Idrissa Gueye, the on-field captain, they were sort of at the edge of a tunnel, sort of waving at people to come off. Sadio Mane was clearly very reluctant to go off, and Sadio Mane, former Liverpool player, in the end was the man who got them back on the pitch. But I mean, I've been covering football for 27 years now. I've done 12 Cups of Nations. This is only the second time I've ever seen this happen. It happened at a Lille versus Manchester United game in 2005, which I also happened to be at. But I've never seen a team go off for as long as that, for 15 minutes.
You mentioned Sadio Mane. Before I get Nels to come back in and talk to you directly, Jonathan, let's just hear from Sadio Mane. This is how he explained to the BBC why he eventually decided to lead the team back onto the pitch.
I think he will be crazy to not play this game because the referee give penalty and go out of the game, and I think this is going to be the worst things especially in Africa football. For me, this is cannot. I rather lose than this kind of things happen to our football.
Jonathan, the wider tournament, what was your take on it? I mean, Nels spoke quite highly of it in terms of how it organised and how it sort of played out in terms of if you followed it from afar. How did it look when you were close up to it?
Oh, the stadiums are excellent, playing surfaces excellent, infrastructure excellent. Morocco are co-host of the World Cup in 2030. Certainly, if you compare it to Qatar, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, 4 years out, Morocco is streets ahead of any of them. So all of that was great. The level of football played, I think, was very high. The criticism you'd have was it was almost too good, too perfect. There weren't many shocks. It was slightly predictable football, albeit quite good football. And I wrote in my preview for the final, unless we get a really dramatic game, this is a tournament that risks being forgotten. And for 92 minutes, I think it would have been forgotten. And then suddenly that last sort of hour was just sort of all the craziness you could imagine bundled together.
Nels.
Yes, Jonathan, can you speak to me a little bit about the concept of fair play? Because that's something that really broke out on social media. That a lot of people were very critical of the Senegalese team, saying that they shouldn't have walked off the actual pitch. But the Senegalese actually rightfully felt aggrieved. And then some people saying that, well, it was unsportsmanlike, it didn't abide by fair play. Then the actual argument emerged of one in which they were saying that, well, this very concept of fair play, has a bit of colonial undertones to it, or so. It feels a little bit like almost as if you should accept subjugation or perhaps collaborate or be complicit with it, as opposed to be defiant towards it. Can I just ask, what's your perspective on that perspective?
I mean, I think this is a complicated issue in this specific circumstance. So fundamentally, I think you have to accept a referee's decision. There is no game if you do not do that. If players just walk off a pitch when they don't like a decision, then the game is anarchy. It cannot go on. At some point, when you take the field, you're accepting the referee is in charge. Now, I think there is context here, which perhaps makes their actions explicable, if not excusable. And that context, it really goes back. I mean, it goes back, I guess, to relations between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, but more specifically, the Women's Cup of Nations, which was held in Morocco last year. In the final, Morocco were 2-0 up against Nigeria. They ended up losing 3-2. Morocco protested against the refereeing, and the Ivorian head of refereeing for CAF, the Confederation of African Football, Numande Desire Doué, he was sacked because of that. Now, the previous Men's Cup of Nations in Ivory Coast 2 years ago, he had been in charge of the refereeing, and I would say by some way that was the best refereeing I'd ever seen at a Cup of Nations. I think their use of VAR is the best I've ever seen at any tournament. So it seemed to me, as admittedly a bit of an outsider, that he was doing an excellent job. But he is sacked because of this Moroccan protest. And I think there is a perception more generally in Africa that Morocco have too much sway over CAF. Now, one of the reasons for that is it's obviously one of the wealthier nations. Their football infrastructure is excellent. The fact they've got the World Cup in 2030. But we also saw this real the sense of a quest for Morocco to win the Cup of Nations. They haven't won it for 50 years. So winning it on home soil after all this investment, it was this tremendous need. The players were clearly playing under great pressure, great expectation. And that manifested, I think, in a series of decisions throughout the knockout stage. So Tanzania in the last 16, Cameroon in the quarterfinal, Nigeria in the semi, where there was nothing egregious, but there was a perception that the home nation got all the 50-50s. And the worst element of it was, and this began in the semi-final with Stanley Nwabali, the Nigeria keeper. The ball boys kept stealing his towel, which might not sound like much, but it's obviously really annoying.
And they did it in the final as well.
They did,
You said, yeah.
And in the final, you had Yefan Diouf, who's the third choice keeper for Senegal. He was standing there holding the towel of Edouard Mendy to stop it being stolen. And he ends up being wrestled to the ground by four ball boys. So clearly that has, I mean, any concept of fair play has gone out the window.
Your concept of fair play has gone there, Nels.
Pretty much.